We all make promises. But in business, a promise is way more than that. It's a contract. So what happens when one of those big, legally binding promises breaks? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into here. Your guide to contract remedies.
Just imagine it for a second. You've signed a deal, you're holding up your end of the bargain, but the other side, they just drop the ball. The whole thing falls apart. It's frustrating, it's probably costing you money, and it leaves you with one giant question. Okay, what now? What can you actually do about it? That's the question we're answering today.
Let's start with the first thing on everyone's mind, the money. If a broken promise costs you, how do you even begin to calculate a fair price for that failure? The answer, and you might find this surprising, comes from a story about a 19th century flour mill. It's a classic case that, believe it or not, set the standard we still follow. To get there, we have to jump in a time machine and go all the way back to 1854. The case is called Hadley versus Baxendale. And I know, it sounds ancient, but the simple, powerful rule that came out of this fight over a broken engine part is still the absolute foundation for how we figure out contract damages today.
Okay, so here's the story. A flour mill's main part, its crankshaft, breaks. The whole operation just grinds to a halt. The owners, the Hadleys, hire a courier, Baxendale, to get the broken part to a manufacturer. They need it as a model to make a new one. But the courier was late, really late. This meant the mill was just sitting there, silent, losing profits every single day. So the Hadleys sued, which led to this huge question. Was the courier responsible for all that lost business?
The court's answer was honestly kind of brilliant. They needed a fair way to draw a line in the sand, to decide which losses were the courier's problem and which weren't. And what they came up with was a test that all boils down to one key idea: foreseeability. And here it is, the clever two-part test the court created. First you ask, are the losses a natural, direct result of the breach? You know, the obvious stuff. And then there's part two. Were there any unique losses that both sides could have reasonably foreseen when they shook hands on the deal? The really crucial question here was, did the mill owners ever actually tell the courier, hey, listen, our entire business is shut down until you deliver this part?
So what happened? Well, the Hadleys lost. The court basically said it wasn't foreseeable that a late delivery would stop an entire factory. For all the courier knew, they had a spare part sitting around. Because the Hadleys never spelled out their special situation, those huge lost profits were seen as just too remote. So the takeaway is simple. You can only claim damages that are an obvious result of the breach or that you specifically warned the other party about beforehand.
Okay, so getting paid for damages is one thing, but what happens when the failure is so fundamental, so catastrophic that you just want out? You don't even want the contract anymore. Can you just tear up the whole agreement and walk away? To answer that one, we have to look at another legendary case. This time, it's about a ship that wasn't fit for the sea and a deal that was about to go under. This case, Hong Kong Fur, is what teaches us when a breach is so bad that the whole relationship is just over. So here's the scenario. A shipping company rents a big vessel for 2 full years. But the ship they get is in terrible shape. It needs a ton of repairs, taking it out of service for about 20 weeks right at the start of the deal. The renters were furious. They basically said, this is not what we signed up for, and they tried to terminate the entire 24-month contract. The big question for the court was that fair? Was the breach really bad enough to sink the whole deal?
What the court did here was really clever. They introduced more flexibility. See, before this, contract terms were basically black or white. You had conditions, which are the absolute deal breakers. Any breach, no matter how small, means you can walk away. And then you had warranties, the more minor stuff, where a breach only gets you some money. The court created a third, middle category, called an intermediate term.
And here it is. This is the golden rule that came out of the case. This is the test. You can only terminate a contract if the breach is so serious that it substantially deprives the innocent party of the whole benefit of the contract. In other words, you have to ask yourself, does this failure completely ruin the entire point of the deal for me? This table lays it all out perfectly. For a condition, any breach, you can terminate. For a warranty, any breach, you only get money. But for that middle ground intermediate term, it all depends on how serious the breach is. So back to our rusty ship. The court decided that, yeah, losing 20 weeks was bad, but it didn't destroy the whole benefit of a 104-week contract. They'd still get the ship for almost all the time. So they could claim damages for the downtime for sure, but they couldn't just terminate the whole deal.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground, from a broken part in a mill to an unseaworthy ship at sea. So let's pull all of this together into a simple, practical toolkit you can use anytime you're looking at a broken contract.
Okay, here it is, your two-step toolkit. When a contract breaks, you just ask 2 key questions. Question 1, all about the money. What damages are owed? To answer that, you use the Hadley foreseeability test. Were the losses a natural consequence, or were they special losses you told them about in advance? Then, question 2, about the relationship. Can I terminate this thing? For that, you use the Hong Kong Fur whole benefit test. Was the breach so catastrophic, it basically destroyed the entire point of the contract for you?
So these two powerful ideas, one from a mill part, the other from a rusty ship, they still form the bedrock of modern contract law. It's amazing how durable they are. But it does leave us with one last big question to chew on. In today's super fast-paced world of digital contracts, of software as a service, of complex global supply chains, are these old rules born from a physical world still the right fit? Well, that's a challenge that businesses and lawyers are dealing with right now. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.